How's it going, everybody? I'm sorry it's been so long since our last video. I've been dealing with a sickness, but this was a topic I couldn't wait on anymore. We gotta talk about the Marvel Strike Force combat. Is it in trouble? Is our core gameplay loop kind of deteriorating, kind of degrading? We got some weird nerfs, an insane buff that kind of decided who was gonna win U32 before anybody knew this was a change that happened. And honestly, some overarching themes that a lot of our new teams have been coming to the game with that definitely raise a red flag for me. Definitely are very concerning as a strategically minded person. So let's go ahead, let's jump into it. Starting about this weird nerf. Rip Phoenix synergy for Magic. Yeah, when people saw Magic getting reworked for the New Mutants team, a lot of us were like, oh, I mean, that's kind of cool. So if I don't put Magic with the New Mutants, which it seems she's going to be the first person subbed off, as Sunspot deals with taunts, right? I can put her with the Phoenix Force. And this is kind of like when they let Scorpion go play with Infestation for a little bit. Well, they axed that out right away. So this red part of the passive is what used to be in her kit pre-rework, and now this is just gone. So on turn, if Ally Phoenix has died, and Dark Phoenix is currently not an ally, summon Dark Phoenix. This can only trigger once per match. So, I mean, what does this really mean? This means that if I have Magic and Phoenix on the field at the same time, and the Phoenix dies, goes Dark, Dark Phoenix dies, and then Magic is still alive, and then takes a turn, she'll bring Dark Phoenix back. So, it's pretty niche. It happened more often when this was first introduced to the game, I think 3 years ago around Christmas time, mostly because we didn't have the same sort of tools we have now. In all honesty, at the highest end, Magic being paired with Phoenix Force would be bad for the Phoenix Force team. Like, what do you want with the Phoenix Force team? You want to limit the enemy speed set. You want to hopefully limit their speed bar. Maybe you want to address any sort of speed up they can get. There's not really room for Magic on that team. And for the, really in-depth crowd, they know you would just kill Magic before Phoenix. You would time out once Dark Phoenix is on the field. And that's it. So it's not like this would have broke the game. The fact they took it out, maybe it's going to just make things a little bit less complicated for sort of those mid-game players who aren't, super tuned in to all those sort of little, cheat codes along the way. I can kind of see it, but it still felt like a weird nerf. But I need to stand back a little bit, because I've often said, if they feel they need to buff or nerf a character for the health of the game, I think they should. Especially when it comes to, a 3-year-old character they want to rework. What's a good for instance here? I would love for them to rework Doom. Maybe Doom's gimmick is too strong with 3 turns. If they were to give Doom new stats, but the cost was that instead of giving his ally 300% turn meter and himself 300% turn meter, he only gave him and his ally 200% turn meter. Only gave him and his ally 100% turn meter. I'd still be like, okay, but I have a new stat Doom now. I'm okay with this. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes the level of power and complexity in kits will just negate a certain character from ever getting reworked. And I think that's trash, right? I think that's nice. Honestly, I think most of our reworks are trash anyway, because they have the high affinity characters, like a Spider-Man, like a whatever, like a Magic. But because they're not the centerpiece of that team, they're just not interesting. That's not really fun. I like to play with my favorite heroes, right? Like when Hulk got his rework, that crushed me because he's such a boring character in this game, which is a travesty because it's the MF and Hulk, Anyway, I digress. So, is this a weird nerf? Yes. Was this a needed nerf? I don't think so. I guess it lowers the complexity a little bit for the mid game, but it is what it is, right? Like I said, I'm always a proponent that if they feel they need to for the health of the game, sure. If that means we can get a character back that does something cool. Now, Magic doesn't do anything cool, so it's kind of a not great example for that point. But then we have the other spectrum here where they did a giga buff, and I mean a freaking giga buff to Juggernaut, which is crazy. So this new green line in Juggernaut's kit it was just thrown in before U32 started. Until this triggers, until an enemy uses their ultimate, Juggernaut gains 2000% resistance and can only lose up to 20% of this character's max health. And this does apply to percentage-based damage. So this is a team that I took into my first U32 match. This is a team that would work. Mephisto goes twice. He does a 50% hit into Juggernaut. And then he does another basic that does bleeds. He's hitting into his own vulnerable. He's doing a lot of damage. After that, Blaster goes. And I have to bring Apocalypse because there's an Emma. So once that happens, there's no longer 4 accursed allies. And I would win this matchup. What I didn't know is they that new part of Juggernaut's kit. So check that out right there. Does that look like 50% damage to you? Juggernaut took 20%. This is a crazy buff, and it really only kind of affects Mephisto. I mean, it affects a lot of characters, but if you come in here with like Fantastic Four and you let Franklin go first, well, that ultimate that Franklin does off rip, that immediately takes this passive away from Juggernaut, and then you can maybe kill him. But if you don't know that, you're going with Mephisto that opens up with a basic, that's an issue, right? Or if you come in here with like a Yo-Yo who does a special followed by a Damon ultimate, well, that's another issue because the damage is limited. So they just sprung this out of nowhere, and hundreds of players were losing matches against Curse that they would otherwise win. And it wasn't just the first cruiser, right? This happened to a lot of people throughout. Now, the downstream effects of this is that Curse is now like one of the best defensive teams in Crucible, and it's not particularly close. I heard some people saying like, oh, they did this so that the Krakens would get a super big advantage and they'd always win. Brother, this has nothing to do with the Krakens. How many teams are moved with the new mutants of the current team? Undying Immortal, that's 1 patch, 2 patch, 3 patch, 4 patch, 5 patch. This was 6 patches ago, homie. These characters are straight farmable. This had nothing to do with giving the Krakens a buff so they can auto win. All these guys are now in the diamond store, right? So you can get them up to 3 diamonds. This is kind of a great buff for everybody because it gives the Curse something they never had before. Staying power on defense. But it wasn't announced, which is like, but why? Why though, right? So there is a workaround. Just make sure you go in with somebody that can ult first and then nuke them. But it does hard counter like Mephisto, which is a character that a lot of people used to use to try and beat a Curse. So super awkward, right? And this made me start thinking. So this is where, that's the buff, that's the nerf, right? That's fine. But this topic made me start looking at all the teams that have come out recently and how they impact our characters. So I would say traditionally in Marvel Strike Force, when a new team is made, it's not how they impact your characters that is the center point of the design. It's how do these characters affect themselves, and then you use that tool to beat people. But recently, that's been the absolute opposite. So we look at a team like a Curse. So what does Satana do? Satana makes so that you cannot put slow ability block defense down or trauma on her, and you can't reduce her speed bar. Hood makes it so hero enemies cannot gain speed stat. You cannot gain speed up. You cannot gain charge. You cannot gain offense up. You cannot assist. You cannot put slow on them. You cannot gain speed bar. Everything. Like, if there's 3 avenues of speed manipulation, it's speed up slow, they're the polar opposites. Speed stat increase, decrease, polar opposites. Speed bar increase, decrease, again, polar opposites. These guys are covering everything, plus assists, plus all these other things. So they're taking all the strategy away from you, which, if you guys remember the Null fight, this was my biggest critique of the Null fight, is that by limiting what people can actually do, first of all, you're spelling out what you're supposed to do to beat this team. You're supposed to blind the accursed team to beat them. That's going to be a thing, right? I believe that's something that's definitely something the New Mutants do, and I believe that's something Thunderstrike does as well, right? So they like buff these guys even more so we can't Alpha Strike them anymore with like a Mephisto team in hopes that we'll use the next answer. So when we're doing this sort of all-encompassing crazy control, it really dilutes, in my opinion, the strategy of the game. Now, we have a better defensive team, which we've definitely lacked in Crucible, but at what cost? And then I started going down the line, right? So Starjammers as well, but this time at least there's a bigger gate on it. Lilandra, if you want to stop up that speed up vector, you have to have the whole team. If you have the whole team, there's obviously lots to work around for Starjammers. Starjammers are in no way, shape, or form some unbeatable god team, right? But she stops speed up and she stops her from getting slow. Howard stops the speed stat and he stops the speed bar. And he gives speed bar and Havoc is... So it's, again, it's a lesser degree, but it's the same thing. Undying, same thing. Zombie Juggernaut, can't gain speed up, it's on spawn. You're always above 50% life, right? Zombie Witch, can't get speed stat or speed bar. We move over to the Brimstone team, one of the new war teams, like Undying. So what does Daemon do? No speed stat. What does Hellcat do? No speed up, no speed bar. And there's a lot of other stuff they do here too, right? Like no charge, rage, death proof, assist. Now, they're instead of doing interesting stuff for themselves, they're taking away interesting stuff from you. Now, this has been a thing that's been applied in Marvel Strike Force before, but it seems like it's to one of the highest degrees ever. And of course, we got our hybrid characters. Now, I would argue Professor X, this is warranted. He's a mythical character. He stops speed bar. He stops speed up. Let's talk about, what does Super Skrull do? Super Skrull didn't stop anything. He just gained speed bar. He did something, right? Same with Doom. He didn't stop you from doing anything. He would just get speed bar, get energy, and go. What does Dormammu do? He gives you revives. Again, he's activating something inside of you instead of limiting what the enemy can do. Mephisto, again, he's doing everything. That's why he's one of the best characters in the game, right? He's not only giving a bunch of buffs and debuffs out there, which is something he's doing, but his Mark of Mephisto does stop speed bar rewind. So he's controlling a little bit, right? That was our first taste. What does Odin do? Odin is a selfish character. He's not doing anything to the enemy. It's just everything that Odin's doing, right? Emma X, she's stopping speed stat. Franklin, I'm hiding it, but with enough allies, he's stopping speed stat too. Now we get to the new team. And again, in Crucible, if this character has 3 new mutant allies on spawn, after all characters on spawn effects, he's a freaking Ares. He takes your speed up. He takes your defense up. He takes your offense up. So again, it's just limiting what you can do. He stops your speed stat. And then what does Wolfbane do? Stops your assist, stops your speed bar. So again, those 3 vectors completely control. Now, I very much dislike this because I feel smothered when I'm trying to think of what I should use, right? So now you have to think about what your characters can do, what the enemy is trying to take away from what they can do, and then what those characters do, and what your characters can take away from them. It's becoming a lot of this super complicated equation, but now the teams on the what are they taking away from you, it's just snowballed further and further and further to the point where it's starting to take away from the fun in a big, big way for me. Now, if we were to go in game again and we check this out, let's see what team. I just listed a bunch of teams. I want to go back and we'll see when this stops, okay? New Mutants have this. Undyne has this. Immortal doesn't. It's a raid team. Brimstone has this in War. Insidious 6 doesn't have this. It's a raid team. Secret Warriors was just like a throwaway rework team with Phantom Rider. They stop speed bar, but they are an offensive team. So they're not inherently meant to sort of tax you in this very, in my opinion, suffocating way. Infestation was a throwaway team to give Scorpion a temporary home. Hellfire Club, a raid team. Fantastic Four, I didn't put them up there. Guess what Fantastic Four does in Arena? Stop speed stat, stop speed bar. And also Professor X exists there as well, so you would assume he's there to stop the speed up. So all of our game modes are coming down to just sort of base speed stat, and then what effects is Team B stopping Team A from even being able to do. All right, Accursed, we already talked about that. They're the main perpetrators here. Raid team, and then we have the Starjammers. It's been months and months where any sort of PvP team in their given lane is trying harder and harder and harder to suffocate what you're able to do, which is making things less interesting. Now, to a certain degree, that has to exist, right? Because we have characters and teams that, I mean, let's just look at Starjammers, the opposite side of the coin. So not only are they taking that away from you, but they're also gaining a crazy amount of speed bar and a crazy amount of speed stat. So if you can't stop some of that, you're doomed because you'll get alpha striked out of infinity, right? And I understand that's what they're trying to go for here. They're really trying to limit the alpha striking. But then they release a character like Daemon or a character like Blue Marvel, right? I understand that there's supposed to be some give and take here, but at least from the speed vector of everything, this is starting to come down to, how am I going to eventually beat this team? Well, the easy solution for them is just to increase your speed stat. Increase your base speed stat. So you can't get speed up, you can't get speed bar, you can't get speed stat increase unless through a positive effect, but they're also stopping you from getting speed up anyway. So how can you handle that? Well, if they increase the base speed stat, or if they do what they did last time we had this problem, which was when we first had the Infinity Watch. This was sort of the first taste of a team that, instead of doing super interesting stuff for themselves, they do, right? Hank giving speed up as one is super interesting. But this was sort of the first team that really dialed in on limiting what you can do. Captain Britain made it so that you cannot get a speed bar anywhere in that match. He made it so that Illuminatis cannot have their speed stat reduced except by ammo, which was something they added after the fact. Hank made it so that they can't gain slow. Black Panther Shuri made it so that villains can't gain speed up, which was, you know, at the time it was Cabal, it was Masters of Evil. So this is the first taste. And what happened immediately after the Illuminati team? We had the huge Ares stat increase. Now, of course, that was not like a gut reaction, like, oh shit, we overdid Illuminati, we increased everyone's stats by 50% damage, health, and all this nonsense. Of course, that was something that was planned out. But it's like the steps that led to this. How long did Illuminati stay in the meta because of this on the defensive side, right? Again, we can go back in game and we can scroll down. So Starjammers were the eventual solution to the Illuminati. Well, how long did it take before we got there? Immortals were not the solution to Illuminati. You know, that many teams. So there's definitely concern there. Now, of course, I'm not the smartest, most gifted person who can analyze everything from, you know, 4 different dimensions. There are workarounds. Like we talked about the Accursed for a second, like what's the counter to Accursed? We'll go in there with blinds, right? So you have your Thunderstrike characters, your new mutants do blinds, they're probably going to trash Accursed. So there are these doors that are left open, but it's one door. And so it becomes like a very like, this is your path, go and do that. And it's either that, or it's crazy Alpha Strike them by going first, which if they continue to clam down all the different avenues of speed, instead of just 1 or 2, then it becomes like base speed set increase, Alpha Strike to infinity, right? Which I'm not a super duper big fan of that, if I'm being honest with you. Now, what was I gonna say? I had something important to, I forget. I guess it couldn't have been that important. This is something that has been on my mind for quite a while. It's something I wanted to share with you guys. I'm super interested to know your opinions on this, because it could mean that instead of having like, I know what I was going to say. Instead of having like all the different speed bars, speed stats, speed manipulations, all those speed stuff countered in every single team, if they only did 2 or 1 in a given team, then they had the positive side on the opposite end, that team would no longer be the best in its game mode, right? So when we talk about like what makes a team the best in its game mode, well, this new Mutants team has higher base speed than does the Accursed, and they're going to counter everything that the Accursed does. And then they have the blind, right? They supercharged New Mutants because they needed New Mutants to be the best team bar 0 in Cosmic Crucible. Every team, in my opinion, does not have to be the best team in that game mode. If a new Crucible or new War team comes to the game and they are the 3rd best War team or the 2nd best Crucible team, or even with the Accursed, does that actually kill a team on arrival? Or does having a character like Cannonball instead of a character like Iceman or Wolverine kill a team on arrival? Right? I don't think that the meta leap has to be this crazy all the time, and we have to suffocate things and only leave one recourse to beat a team to sell these teams. I think that you can absolutely just have more popular characters, better uses for them instead of just their game mode, pocket dimensions, towers, boss fights, all this kind of stuff, right? There's better ways to do it, in my opinion, but I'm going to leave it there because it kind of got a little ranty there at the end when I tried to remember what I was doing. Still got a little bit of brain fog. Sorry about that. But let me know your thoughts on this topic. How did you feel about the nerf to magic, the absolute random buff to Juggernaut, and everything else we talked about today? Super curious to get your thoughts in the comment section below. I look forward to talking with you there. But for now, guys, stay happy, stay healthy, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Bye for now.